to have a look at how ions are formed today. So if we start off by thinking of the noble gases, so we are over here. We know that they're very unreactive, and that's because their outer electron shell is full. So we're going to look at this in two parts today. So we've got metal ions and we've got non-metal ions. So you'll see I've given us sodium as our metal ion example and oxygen as our non-metal ion example. If we have a look at sodium first then, so we're going to have a look at the difference between the atom and the ion. So I've enlarged this bit from the periodic table here, so we can see that the atomic number of sodium is 11, which will mean that it has 11 protons. So if we go ahead and add them in here, so that number will need to stay the same for the ion as well, because as we know, the number of protons determines the element. So we'll again have 11 protons in there as well. Now, if we go to the atom, you'll remember that atoms are neutral because they have the same number of protons and electrons. So the charges cancel each other out. So if we add them in, so we'll have 1, 2 in our first electron shell, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's us with 10, and then we've got our last one, 11, which is there. So this electron is all by itself in the outermost electron shell. So we can make the outermost electron shell full in one of two ways. We can either add an extra 7 electrons to this outermost shell here, or we can take this one away, and this will then be our outermost electron shell, and that will be a full electron shell. So it's much easier to take away for the element to lose its 1 electron rather than to gain 7. So what we'll end up with is our ion will look like this. So we've still got our 11 protons, but we now only have 10 electrons because we've lost that outermost one. So we've got 10 there instead of our 11. So that means that our overall charge for the atom, we know it should be 0. And this one, seeing as we've got 11 protons and 10 electrons, it means that there is 1 positive charge on that ion. And generally speaking, metallic ions are all positive, so they all lose electrons more easily than they gain the electrons. So if we have a look at oxygen then, so again looking at the atom and the ion, so we've got our atomic number is 8, so adding in 2, 3, and then again in the ion. Okay, so then if we go in to add in our electrons, never wrote in the protons. Okay, so we've got our 8 protons for oxygen. And then if we go in and add in the electrons, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that then leaves us with these 2 electrons that aren't in a pair. So we're missing 2 electrons from this outermost shell. So we'll have an overall charge of 0 there. So for our ion, what we need to do is the atom needs to gain 2 electrons. So we'll have 1, 2, and then it wants to have this one full, seeing as this is the outermost electron shell. So then that gives us 10 electrons. So because it's got 2 more electrons than protons, that gives us an overall charge of -2. Again, non-metals generally are negative. The only exception is hydrogen. So you can see that it's in this group. So we know that it's a non-metal, but it is in this group and it will lose its electron. So it's essentially just 1 proton and 1 neutron when it becomes an ion. So that is how metallic and non-metallic ions are formed.